The stagecoach hit a patch of black ice on the mountain pass, and Miriam Porter felt her stomach lurch as the entire vehicle tilted sideways, sending her body crashing through the canvas side and into the frozen darkness below. The world became a blur of white and bitter cold as she tumbled down the embankment, her scream swallowed by the howling wind that swept across the Utah wilderness. She landed hard in a drainage ditch, the impact knocking the air from her lungs, and within seconds the freezing water that pooled at the bottom began seeping through her traveling dress, chilling her to the bone. Above her, she could hear the driver shouting, the horses whinnying in panic, but the sounds seemed distant and dreamlike as shock began to set in. Her teeth chattered uncontrollably, and when she tried to move, pain shot through her left ankle. The January night was brutally cold, the kind of cold that settled into your bones and refused to let go. She had been traveling from Salt Lake City to meet her aunt in the Southern Territories, hoping to start a new life after her father's death had left her with nothing but debts and broken promises. Now she was going to freeze to death in a ditch in the middle of nowhere, and nobody would even know where to find her body. She heard boots crunching through snow, moving quickly, and then a shadow appeared above her. Through her blurred vision, she could make out the silhouette of a man in a wide-brimmed hat, his coat collar pulled high against the wind. "Hold on there," a deep voice called down to her. "I am coming to get you." Miriam tried to respond, but her jaw was clenched too tightly from the cold. She watched as the man climbed down into the ditch with surprising agility, his boots splashing into the icy water beside her. Strong hands slid under her back and knees, lifting her as though she weighed nothing at all. "Got you," he said, and she could hear the strain in his voice as he climbed back up the steep embankment with her in his arms. "You are going to be all right. Just hold on." When they reached level ground, Miriam finally got a good look at her rescuer. He was young, probably no more than 25, with a weathered face that spoke of years spent under the harsh sun. Dark hair fell across his forehead beneath his hat, and his jaw was set with determination. His brown eyes met hers with concern. "James," someone called from near the stagecoach. "Is she alive?" "Barely," James shouted back. "She is half frozen. We need to get her warm now, or she will not make it through the night." The other man appeared beside them. He was older, with a gray beard and the official badge of a deputy marshal. "The stagecoach axle is broken. We are not going anywhere tonight. There is a way station about a mile back. Can you carry her?" "I will manage," James said, adjusting his grip on Miriam. "Get the driver to bring whatever supplies he can salvage." "Hold on," Miriam managed to say through chattering teeth. "My trunk, all my things." "We will worry about your things later," James said firmly. "Right now, we need to worry about keeping you alive." He started walking, moving at a steady pace despite her weight. The deputy and the stagecoach driver followed behind, the driver leading one of the horses that had been freed from the harness. The wind cut through them like knives, and Miriam could feel ice forming in her hair. She tried to stay conscious, tried to focus on the rhythm of James's steps, the warmth of his body against hers, but the cold was overwhelming. "Talk to me," James said suddenly. "What is your name?" Miriam," she stammered. "Miriam Porter." "Well, Miss Porter, I am James Zimmerman. I am a ranch hand from Tropic, heading back from delivering cattle in Salt Lake City. You picked a hell of a night to go tumbling into a ditch." Despite everything, she felt a weak laugh bubble up. "It was not exactly my choice." "Fair enough," he said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "Where were you headed?" "South," she managed. "To my aunt's place near Kanab. She runs a boarding house there." "Long way from Salt Lake City." "Long way from anything," she whispered, feeling darkness creeping at the edges of her vision. "Stay with me, Miss Porter," James said sharply. "Keep talking. Tell me about this aunt of yours." She forced her eyes open. "Never met her. My father's sister. He and she did not speak for years, but when he died, she wrote to me, said I could come live with her if I wanted. Did not have anywhere else to go." "No other family?" "Mother died when I was young. Father was all I had. And then the fever took him last October." "I am sorry," James said, and the genuine sympathy in his voice made her throat tighten. They walked in silence for a few minutes, and Miriam felt herself drifting. The cold was becoming less sharp, which some distant part of her mind recognized as dangerous. She was so tired. It would be so easy to just close her eyes and sleep. "Miss Porter," James said urgently. "Miriam, stay awake. I can see the station just ahead. You need to hold on a little longer." She tried to respond, but could not make her mouth work properly. Her whole body felt heavy and numb. "Damn it!" James muttered, and suddenly he was running, jostling her in his arms. She heard him shouting, heard the sound of a door being kicked open, and then blessed warmth surrounded them. "What in the name of—" an elderly woman's voice exclaimed. "She went into the ditch," James said quickly. "She has been in freezing water for too long. We need to get her warm immediately." Miriam felt herself being lowered onto something soft, a bed or a couch. Hands were pulling at her wet clothes, and she tried to protest, but could not find the strength. "Boy, you get out of here while I get these wet things off her," the woman ordered. "Martha, bring me every blanket we have got and get the fire built up high. Move!" Miriam drifted in and out of consciousness as the women worked over her. She felt the wet fabric being peeled away from her skin, felt the rough warmth of wool blankets being piled on top of her. Someone was rubbing her feet and hands vigorously, and the sensation of blood returning to her extremities was agonizing. "Is she going to make it?" she heard James ask from somewhere nearby. "Hard to say," the older woman replied. "She is young and strong, which is in her favor, but she got awful cold. Next few hours will tell. What can I do?" "Best thing for someone this cold is body heat," the woman said matter-of-factly. "I know that might seem improper, but it is the truth. My husband can take your place if you would rather not." There was a pause, and then James said, "No, I will do it. I pulled her out of that ditch. I am not going to let her die now." "All right then. Martha will show you where to go. I got her wrapped up decent enough. You just hold her close and share your warmth. And you better be a gentleman about it, young man, or you will answer to me." "Yes, madam," James said respectfully. Miriam felt the blankets lift slightly, and then a warm, solid presence settled beside her, arms wrapped around her, pulling her against a chest that radiated heat like a stove. She instinctively curled closer, seeking that warmth like a flower seeking sun. "That is it," James murmured close to her ear. "You are safe now. Just rest." She let herself drift then, let the darkness take her. But it was a different darkness now. Not the cold, lonely darkness of the ditch, but something warmer, safer. She was dimly aware of James holding her through the night, of his steady breathing, his heartbeat beneath her ear. Once, she thought she heard him praying softly, asking God to spare her life. Another time, she felt his hand gently smoothing her hair back from her face. When she finally woke, pale morning light was filtering through a small window. She was still cocooned in blankets, still pressed against James's chest. He was asleep, his face relaxed, one arm draped protectively over her. For a moment, she just lay there, studying him. He had a strong profile, she noticed, and there was a small scar on his chin. His hands, resting near hers, were calloused and rough from hard work. She shifted slightly, and his eyes immediately opened, alert and concerned. "Miss Porter," he said, his voice rough with sleep. "How do you feel?" "Cold," she admitted. "But better?" "Alive." Relief flooded his features. "Thank God. You gave us all quite a scare." She became suddenly aware of their position, of the intimacy of lying in his arms, and felt heat flood her cheeks. We should probably." "Right," he said quickly, releasing her and sitting up. He ran a hand through his disheveled hair, looking uncomfortable. "I apologize for any impropriety, Miss Porter. Mrs. Sullivan said it was necessary." "I understand," Miriam said softly, "and I am grateful. You saved my life, Mr. Zimmerman." "James," he corrected, "after spending the night keeping someone from freezing to death, I figure we can dispense with formalities. Then you must call me Miriam." He smiled at her, a warm, genuine smile that transformed his entire face. "All right, Miriam." Mrs. Sullivan bustled into the room, carrying a tray. She was a stout woman with iron gray hair and sharp blue eyes. "Well, I am glad to see you awake, young lady. You had us worried. Now, I have got some hot broth here, and you are going to drink every drop of it. You need to get your strength back." The broth was thin and salty, but wonderfully hot, and Miriam sipped it gratefully while Mrs. Sullivan fussed over her. James excused himself to check on the other men, and Miriam found herself oddly disappointed by his absence. "That is a good man right there," Mrs. Sullivan said, following her gaze. "Carried you a whole mile through a snowstorm. Did not even hesitate when I told him what needed to be done to warm you up. A lot of men would have been too worried about propriety to do what was necessary, and you would have died for it." "I know," Miriam said quietly. "I owe him everything. He has been working for the Zimmerman ranch his whole life, Mrs. Sullivan continued as she helped Miriam sit up more comfortably. "His daddy was foreman there before he passed. James works harder than any 3 men, and he is honest as the day is long. Going to make some woman a fine husband one day." Miriam felt her cheeks warm again. "You seem quite fond of him." "Known him since he was a boy. He and my son grew up together. My boy went off to California to seek his fortune, but James stayed. Said Utah was home, and he could not imagine being anywhere else." She paused, studying Miriam with those sharp eyes. "What about you, girl? You got any prospects waiting for you down in Kanab?" "No," Miriam admitted. "Just my aunt, who I have never met. I am hoping she will let me work in her boarding house in exchange for room and board until I can figure out what to do with my life." "Your father leave you nothing?" "Debts," Miriam said bitterly. "He was a kind man, but he was terrible with money. Always had some scheme that was going to make us rich. Each one just put us deeper in the hole. When he died, I had to sell everything we had just to pay what he owed. The landlord wanted me out immediately. My aunt's invitation was a miracle. Without it, I would be on the street." Mrs. Sullivan patted her hand sympathetically. "Well, you are young yet, plenty of time to build a new life. And from what I saw, that ankle of yours is not broken, just badly sprained. You will be back on your feet in a few days." Over the next day, Miriam learned that the stagecoach would need significant repairs before it could continue. The driver had sent word to Panguitch for a new axle, but it would be at least 3 days before it arrived. In the meantime, they were all stuck at the way station. Miriam found herself watching James whenever he was near. He was unfailingly polite, but seemed almost shy around her now, as though he did not know how to act after the intimacy they had shared. He spent most of his time helping with repairs around the station or tending to the horses, but she would catch him glancing at her when he thought she was not looking. On the second evening, she was sitting by the fire, her ankle propped up on a stool, when he approached with a cup of coffee. "Thought you might like this," he said, offering it to her. "Gets cold in here once the sun goes down." "Thank you," she said, accepting the cup. "Will you sit with me? I have barely had a chance to thank you properly." He settled into the chair across from her, looking uncomfortable. "No thanks necessary. Anyone would have done the same." "I do not think that is true," Miriam said seriously. "The deputy and the driver were both there, but you were the one who climbed down into that ditch. You were the one who carried me through the storm, and you stayed with me all night, making sure I did not freeze. Like I said, anyone would have. But it was you," she insisted. "Why? You did not know me. I was just a stranger." He was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. "My mother," he finally said. "She died when I was 14. She was riding back from town one winter evening, and her horse threw her. She hit her head and fell into a creek. By the time my father found her, she had frozen to death." He looked up at her, his eyes dark with old pain. "I have always wondered if things might have been different if someone had been there sooner, if someone had pulled her out and kept her warm. So, when I saw you in that ditch, I could not leave you there." Miriam felt tears prick her eyes. "I am so sorry about your mother." "It was a long time ago," he said, but she could hear the grief still fresh in his voice. "But thank you." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the fire crackle. Finally, Miriam said, "Tell me about Tropic. What is it like?" His expression lightened. "It is beautiful, small, only about 50 families. But the land is something special. Red rock cliffs and green valleys. The Zimmermans, they are not my family, but I took their name when they took me in after my parents died. They run cattle mostly, but they are good people, treat me like a son. Do you ever want more? Something beyond ranch work?" He considered this. "I used to think about heading up to Montana, maybe starting my own spread, but I do not know. There is something to be said for staying where you are known, where you have roots. What about you? What do you want?" "I do not even know anymore," Miriam admitted. "Before my father died, I thought I would get married, have children, the usual things. But the man I was courting, he disappeared the moment he learned about the debts. Guess he decided I was not worth the trouble without money to my name." "Then he was a fool," James said firmly. She looked at him in surprise. "You do not even know me." I know you stayed conscious and aware, despite being half frozen. I know you have the strength to start over with nothing. I know you have courage." He met her eyes. "Those things are worth more than money." Something passed between them in that moment, something electric and undeniable. Miriam felt her breath catch, felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the fire or the coffee. "Miriam, James started, then stopped, seeming to think better of it. "I should let you rest. You need to keep that ankle elevated." "James, wait," she said as he stood to leave. When he turned back, she said softly, "Thank you. For everything. Not just for saving my life, but for talking with me, for making me feel like I matter." His expression softened. "You do matter, Miriam. Do not ever let anyone tell you different." After he left, Miriam sat staring into the fire for a long time, her mind in turmoil. She barely knew this man, and yet she felt drawn to him in a way she had never experienced before. He was nothing like the men she had known in Salt Lake City, with their smooth manners and empty promises. James was solid, genuine, the kind of man who did what needed doing without seeking praise or recognition. But she was leaving. In a day or two, the stagecoach would be repaired and she would continue on to Kanab. James would return to Tropic. They would probably never see each other again. The thought filled her with an unexpected sadness. The next morning, Martha, Mrs. Sullivan's daughter, helped Miriam wash and dress. Her trunk had been retrieved from the stagecoach, and it was a relief to wear clean, dry clothes again. Her ankle was still tender, but the swelling had gone down considerably. "You are walking better," Martha observed. She was a cheerful girl of about 19, with her mother's sharp eyes and a quick smile. "Mama says you will be fit to travel soon." "Yes," Miriam said, trying to inject enthusiasm into her voice. "That is good news. You do not sound very happy about it." "No, I am. It is just, I have gotten quite comfortable here. The thought of getting back on that stagecoach is not appealing." Martha gave her a knowing look. "Or maybe it is not the stagecoach you are worried about leaving behind." Miriam felt herself blush. "I do not know what you mean." "Come on now. I have seen the way you look at James, and the way he looks at you when he thinks nobody is watching. Mama says she has never seen him so taken with anyone." "We barely know each other," Miriam protested weakly. "Sometimes that does not matter," Martha said wisely. "Sometimes you just know." But knowing did not change facts. Miriam had no money, no prospects, and a destination waiting for her in Kanab. And James had his life in Tropic, obligations to the family that had taken him in. There was no future for them, no matter what she might feel. That afternoon, word came that the axle had arrived and repairs were underway. They would be able to leave the following morning. Miriam received the news with mixed feelings. She was eager to reach her aunt's house and start building a new life, but she could not shake the sense that she was leaving something important behind. She found James in the barn, tending to the horses. He looked up when she entered, and a smile crossed his face before he could stop it. "Miss Porter," he said, "should you be walking on that ankle?" "It is much better," she assured him. "And I thought we agreed you would call me Miriam." "Miriam," he repeated, and the way he said her name made something flutter in her chest. "What brings you out here?" "I wanted to talk to you. I heard the stagecoach will be ready tomorrow." "Yes, I heard the same." He set down the brush he had been using and turned to face her fully. "You will finally get to meet this aunt of yours." "Yes." She hesitated, then said in a rush, "James, these past few days, getting to know you, it has meant a great deal to me. I want you to know that." He stepped closer, his expression intense. "Miriam, I have to tell you something. These past few days they have meant something to me too, more than they probably should." Her heart was racing. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that I cannot stop thinking about you, that the thought of you getting on that stagecoach tomorrow and riding out of my life makes me feel like I am being torn in half." He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "I know it is crazy. I know we just met. But I have never felt this way about anyone before." "I feel the same way," Miriam whispered. "But James, what can we do? I have to go to Kanab. My aunt is expecting me, and I have nowhere else to go. And you have your life in Tropic." "Then do not go to Kanab," he said urgently. "Come to Tropic with me instead." "James, I cannot I do not have any money. I cannot expect you to support me. We barely know each other." "So we will get to know each other," he said. "Miriam, I am not a rich man. I work for wages. And I live in a small cabin on the ranch, but I can provide for you, and the Zimmermans, they will understand. Mrs. Zimmerman is always saying the place needs a woman's touch." "You are asking me to marry you?" Miriam said, hardly daring to believe it. "I am asking you to give us a chance," James said. He took her hands in his calloused palms warm against hers. "I know it is fast. I know it is not what you planned. But Miriam, when I was holding you that first night, keeping you warm, all I could think was that I never wanted to let you go. And I still feel that way. So, yes, I guess I am asking you to marry me. If you will have me." Miriam felt tears streaming down her cheeks. Every practical part of her mind was screaming that this was insane, that you could not marry someone you had known for 3 days. But her heart was singing a different song entirely. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." James let out a whoop of joy and swept her into his arms, spinning her around despite her injured ankle. When he set her down, he was grinning like a madman. "We will make it work," he promised. "I will write to your aunt, explain the situation, maybe she will understand. And if she does not, then it is her loss," James said firmly. "Miriam, I promise you, I will spend every day of my life making sure you never regret this decision." "I do not think I could regret it," she said softly. "You saved my life, James. Maybe it was supposed to happen this way. Maybe I was meant to fall off that stagecoach so I could find you." He cupped her face gently in his hands. "May I kiss you?" In answer, she rose on her tiptoes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, but then it deepened, becoming something more passionate, more urgent. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I am going to marry you as soon as we get to Tropic," James said. "I am not giving you time to change your mind." "I will not change my mind," Miriam assured him. They told the others at dinner that evening. Mrs. Sullivan looked surprised, but pleased. "Well, I cannot say I am shocked," she said. "You two have been dancing around each other for days. But, James, you treat this girl right, you hear me? She has been through enough." "I will, madam," James promised. "I swear it." The deputy, who had been mostly keeping to himself, raised an eyebrow. "That was quick." "When you know," James said simply, taking Miriam's hand. That night, Miriam lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if she had lost her mind. She was going to marry a man she had known for less than a week. She was giving up the security of her aunt's boarding house for the uncertainty of life on a cattle ranch. Everything about this was impulsive and reckless, and yet she had never been more certain of anything in her life. The next morning, Miriam wrote a letter to her aunt, explaining the situation and thanking her for the generous offer. She promised to repay the coach fare that her aunt had advanced her and expressed hope that they might meet someday under better circumstances. James arranged for Miriam's trunk to be sent to Tropic, and they made plans to travel together. He would ride his horse, and she would take the mare that had been freed from the stagecoach harness. With her ankle still tender, James insisted on keeping a slow pace. They said their goodbyes to Mrs. Sullivan and Martha, who hugged Miriam tight. "You take care of yourself," Mrs. Sullivan said. "And you write to let us know how you are doing, you hear?" "I will," Miriam promised. "Thank you for everything." The ride to Tropic took 2 days. They traveled slowly, stopping frequently to rest Miriam's ankle. James was a patient and attentive companion, pointing out landmarks and telling her stories about the area. They camped the first night in a small canyon, and James built a fire while Miriam made coffee from their supplies. "Are you scared?" James asked as they sat by the fire that evening. "A little," Miriam admitted. "Everything is happening so fast. A week ago, I thought my life was over. Now I am starting a completely new one with a man I barely know." "You know me," James said. "Maybe not everything about me, but you know the important parts. You know I will always protect you. You know I will work hard to provide for you. You know I will be faithful and true." "I do know that," Miriam said softly. "And James, I want you to know that I will be a good wife to you. I am not afraid of hard work. I can cook and clean and mend. I will make you a good home." "I do not doubt it," James said. He reached over and took her hand. "Miriam, I want to be honest with you about something. Life on a ranch is not easy. The winters are harsh and the work is endless. There will be times when money is tight. I want you to know what you are getting into." "I am getting into a life with you," Miriam said. "That is all that matters to me." James, I grew up with nothing. My father and I lived in a one-room apartment above a butcher shop. I wore the same two dresses for years. I am not afraid of being poor. I am afraid of being alone. You will never be alone again, James promised. I swear it. That night, they lay on opposite sides of the fire, but Miriam found herself remembering the warmth of James's arms around her, the steady beat of his heart beneath her ear. She wanted to be close to him again, but propriety dictated they maintain a respectful distance until they were married. Still, she fell asleep with a smile on her face, knowing that soon they would never have to sleep apart again. They arrived in Tropic late the following afternoon. It was a small town, just as James had described, nestled in a green valley with towering red cliffs rising in the distance. The main street had a general store, a small church, and a handful of other buildings. Everything looked neat and well-maintained, and Miriam felt a sense of peace settle over her. "It is beautiful," she said. "Wait until you see it in spring," James said. "Everything blooms, and the whole valley turns green. It is like Eden." He pointed to a large ranch house in the distance. "That is the Zimmerman place. Come on, I want you to meet them." As they approached, a woman came out onto the porch. She was probably in her late 50s, with graying blonde hair and a kind face. "James," she called, "we were starting to worry. You have been gone longer than expected." She paused, noticing Miriam. "And who is this?" "Mrs. Zimmerman," James said, dismounting and helping Miriam down from her horse. "This is Miriam Porter. She is going to be my wife." Mrs. Zimmerman's eyes went wide. "Your wife? James, what on earth?" "It is a long story," James said. "But the short version is that she was thrown from a stagecoach into a frozen ditch. I pulled her out and kept her warm, and now we are getting married." A man appeared in the doorway behind Mrs. Zimmerman. He was tall and weathered, with a thick gray beard. "Did I hear that right? You are getting married?" "Yes, sir," James said. "I know it is sudden, but I would really appreciate your blessing." Mr. Zimmerman studied them both for a long moment. Then a slow smile spread across his face. "Well, I will be damned. Never thought I would see the day. Of course you have our blessing, boy. Bring her inside. Let us hear this story properly." Over dinner, James recounted everything that had happened, with Miriam filling in details here and there. The Zimmermans listened with rapt attention, Mrs. Zimmerman occasionally exclaiming in horror or sympathy. "You poor dear," she said to Miriam when the story was finished. "What a terrible ordeal. But how lucky that James was there." "I know," Miriam said, smiling at James across the table. "I owe him everything." "And you are really going to marry him, after knowing him only a few days?" Mr. Zimmerman asked, though there was no judgment in his tone, only curiosity. "I am," Miriam said firmly. "I know it seems impulsive, but I have never been more certain of anything." Mrs. Zimmerman reached over and patted her hand. "Sometimes you just know. That is how it was with Henry and me. I knew the moment I met him that he was the one. 40 years we have been married, and I have never regretted it." "Where are you planning to live?" Mr. Zimmerman asked James. "I thought we would fix up the old cabin by the creek," James said. "I know it needs work, but—" "Nonsense," Mrs. Zimmerman interrupted. "You will stay in the house with us until you have a proper place ready. I will not have you bringing a bride home to a falling-down cabin." "We do not want to impose," Miriam said quickly. "It is not an imposition," Mrs. Zimmerman said firmly. "We have plenty of room, and I could use the company of another woman around here. These men are hopeless when it comes to civilized conversation." "Now, Sarah," Mr. Zimmerman protested mildly. "It is the truth, Henry, and you know it. You and James spend all day with cattle and horses. I have not had a decent discussion about anything beyond the weather and livestock prices in months." She turned to Miriam with a warm smile. "Please say you will stay, at least until James gets that cabin in order." Miriam looked at James, who nodded encouragingly. "Thank you," she said to Mrs. Zimmerman. "That is very generous." "Wonderful," Mrs. Zimmerman said, clapping her hands together. "Now, when is this wedding going to be?" "As soon as possible," James said. "Tomorrow, if Reverend Michaels is available." "Tomorrow?" Mrs. Zimmerman looked scandalized. "But there is so much to prepare. Miriam will need a proper dress, and we should have a celebration and—" "Mrs. Zimmerman," Miriam said gently, "I do not need anything fancy. I just want to marry James. The sooner the better." Mrs. Zimmerman studied her for a moment, then nodded. "All right, if that is what you want. but at least let me help you fix up that blue dress I saw in your trunk. It deserves some lace at the collar, at least." "That would be lovely," Miriam said, touched by the woman's kindness. That evening, after Mr. Zimmerman and James went to check on the cattle, Mrs. Zimmerman took Miriam up to the guest room. "I know this must all seem very strange to you," she said as she helped Miriam unpack her trunk. "Coming to a new place, marrying a man you barely know. But I want you to know that you are welcome here. James is like a son to us, and that makes you family." "Thank you," Miriam said, feeling tears prick her eyes. "You have no idea how much that means to me. I have not had a family in so long." "Well, you have one now," Mrs. Zimmerman said firmly. She pulled out Miriam's blue dress and examined it critically. "This is a good color on you. Brings out your eyes. We will add some lace here and maybe take in the waist a bit. You have lost weight recently, have you not?" "Since my father died," Miriam admitted. "Money was tight, and I often went without so I could pay the debts." Mrs. Zimmerman's expression softened with sympathy. "That is all behind you now. You will never go hungry in this house, I promise you that. Now, tell me about yourself. James said you were traveling to Kanab to live with your aunt?" Miriam told her the whole story, about her father's death and debts, about the man who had courted her and then abandoned her, about her aunt's letter that had seemed like a lifeline. "And now here I am," she finished, "about to marry a cowboy I met 3 days ago. My father would probably think I had lost my mind. Or maybe he would be happy that you found someone who makes you feel safe and loved," Mrs. Zimmerman suggested. "From what you have told me, your father always wanted the best for you, even if his methods were misguided. I think he would be pleased to know you have found a good man." "I hope so," Miriam said softly. They worked on the dress for several hours, Mrs. Zimmerman's skilled fingers turning the simple garment into something special. By the time they finished, Miriam could hardly believe it was the same dress. "It is beautiful," she breathed. "You will be beautiful in it," Mrs. Zimmerman corrected. "Now, off to bed with you. You have a big day tomorrow." Miriam lay awake for a long time that night, thinking about the strange turns her life had taken. A week ago, she had been on a stagecoach, traveling to an uncertain future with an aunt she had never met. Now, she was lying in a comfortable bed in a warm house, about to marry a man who made her heart race every time he smiled at her. She thought about her father and wondered what he would make of all this. He had always been a dreamer, always believed that something better was just around the corner. Maybe this was his gift to her, one last bit of luck from beyond the grave. She had fallen off that stagecoach at exactly the right time, in exactly the right place, and James had been there to catch her. The next morning dawned clear and cold. Mrs. Zimmerman insisted on making a special breakfast, and the house filled with the smell of fresh bread and bacon. Miriam was too nervous to eat much, but she forced down some coffee and toast. "You need to keep your strength up," Mrs. Zimmerman chided. "Cannot have you fainting during the ceremony." James appeared just as they were finishing breakfast, cleaned up and dressed in his best clothes. His dark hair was still damp from washing, and he had shaved carefully. When he saw Miriam, his eyes lit up. "You look beautiful," he said. "I am still in my everyday dress," Miriam pointed out, laughing. "Wait until you see me in the wedding dress." "I do not think I can wait," James said. "I have been waiting all night for this." "Well, you will have to wait a few more hours," Mrs. Zimmerman said briskly. "Reverend Michaels said he could perform the ceremony at 2 o'clock. That gives us time to get everything ready." Those few hours seemed to both drag and fly by. Mrs. Zimmerman helped Miriam bathe and dress, arranging her long brown hair in an intricate style. When Miriam finally looked at herself in the mirror, she hardly recognized the elegant woman staring back at her. "Oh my," she breathed. "You are lovely," Mrs. Zimmerman said, dabbing at her eyes. "James is a very lucky man." They walked to the small church together, Mr. and Mrs. Zimmerman flanking Miriam like proud parents. James was already there, waiting by the altar with Reverend Michaels, a kindly-looking older man with white hair. Word had apparently spread about the wedding because several townspeople had gathered in the pews. They smiled and whispered as Miriam walked down the aisle, her hand tucked into Mr. Zimmerman's arm. When she reached James, he took her hand, his grip warm and steady. "You really are beautiful," he murmured. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. Reverend Michaels spoke about the sacred nature of marriage, about commitment and love and faith. When it came time for the vows, James spoke his clearly and firmly, his eyes never leaving Miriam's face. I, James Zimmerman, take you, Miriam Porter, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, until death do us part. Miriam's voice shook slightly as she repeated her own vows, but she meant every word. I, Miriam Porter, take you, James Zimmerman, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, until death do us part. By the power vested in me, Reverend Michael said with a smile, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride, James. James cupped Miriam's face gently in his hands and kissed her softly. The small congregation broke into applause, and Miriam felt tears of joy streaming down her face. They were married. After everything she had been through, all the loss and uncertainty and fear, she had found this. She had found James, and she had found a home. The townspeople insisted on a celebration at the general store, which had been cleared out for dancing. Someone produced a fiddle, and soon music filled the air. James led Miriam onto the makeshift dance floor, pulling her close. How do you feel, Mrs. Zimmerman? He asked, his breath warm against her ear. Like I am dreaming, she admitted. Like I am going to wake up and find myself still in that frozen ditch. You are not dreaming, James assured her. This is real. We are real. And I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never doubt it. They danced for hours, surrounded by the friendly faces of their new community. People kept coming up to introduce themselves and offer congratulations. A middle-aged woman named Clara, who ran the general store, promised to help Miriam get settled. A young couple, Tom and Eliza, invited them for dinner once they were in their own place. An older man named Samuel, who ran the livery stable, told James he was glad to see him so happy. That boy has been alone too long, Samuel said to Miriam. Lost too much too young. It is good to see him building something new. As the evening wore on, Miriam felt the warmth of belonging settle over her. These people had welcomed her without question, had embraced her as one of their own simply because she was James's wife. It was more than she had dared hope for. When they finally returned to the Zimmerman ranch house, Mrs. Zimmerman showed them to a room that had been prepared for them. It was cozy and comfortable, with a large bed covered in a colorful quilt and a fire burning in the small fireplace. I will leave you two alone, Mrs. Zimmerman said with a knowing smile. Breakfast will be ready at 7, but do not feel obligated to join us if you want to sleep in. After she left, Miriam and James stood looking at each other, suddenly shy. This was their wedding night, the moment they had both been thinking about and yet not quite preparing for. I am nervous, Miriam admitted. Me too, James said. He crossed to her and took her hands. Miriam, I want you to know that there is no pressure. We do not have to. I mean, we can take this as slowly as you need. I do not want to take it slowly, Miriam said, surprising herself with her boldness. James, you have been nothing but patient and kind and respectful, but I am your wife now, and I want to be close to you. Are you sure? He asked, searching her face. In answer, she reached up and pulled him down for a kiss. This time, there was no hesitation, no holding back. The kiss deepened, became urgent and hungry. James's hand slid to her waist, pulling her against him, and Miriam felt a heat building inside her that had nothing to do with the fire. They made love slowly, tenderly, learning each other's bodies with patience and care. James was gentle, always checking to make sure she was comfortable, and Miriam felt safe in a way she had never experienced before. This was not just physical intimacy, it was emotional too. It was the joining of two souls that had been searching for each other. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the big bed, the firelight casting dancing shadows on the walls. James traced lazy patterns on Miriam's bare shoulder, and she nestled closer to him. I love you, he said suddenly. I know it is probably too soon to say that, but I do. I think I have loved you since the moment I pulled you out of that ditch. I love you too, Miriam whispered. I was so scared that night, so cold and alone, and then you were there. You saved me in more ways than one, James. You gave me a future when I thought I had none. We gave each other a future, he corrected. Miriam, I was going through the motions before I met you, working hard, saving money, but for what? I had no one to share my life with, no one to come home to. Now, I have everything." They talked long into the night, sharing stories and dreams and fears. Miriam told him about her childhood, about her mother's gentle nature and her father's endless optimism. James told her about growing up on the ranch, about the day his parents died, and how the Zimmermans had taken him in without hesitation. "I owe them everything," he said. "They gave me a home when I had nowhere else to go. They taught me how to be a man. I want to make them proud." "You already have," Miriam assured him. "Anyone can see how much they care about you." As dawn began to break, they finally drifted off to sleep, wrapped in each other's arms. Miriam's last conscious thought was that she had never felt so content, so perfectly happy. The next few weeks passed in a blur of domestic bliss. Miriam settled into life at the ranch, learning the rhythms and routines. Mrs. Zimmerman taught her how to make bread and churn butter, how to preserve vegetables and smoke meat. She showed Miriam which herbs grew wild in the hills and how to use them for cooking and medicine. James worked from dawn until dusk, tending cattle and mending fences and doing the 1,000 other tasks that kept a ranch running. But every evening he would come home to Miriam, his face lighting up at the sight of her. They would eat dinner with the Zimmermans, then retreat to their room to be alone together. In early February, James announced that he had finished the repairs on the cabin by the creek. "It is not much," he warned Miriam, "just 2 rooms and a loft, but it is ours. I thought maybe we could move in this weekend, if you want to." "I want to," Miriam said immediately. As much as she had enjoyed staying with the Zimmermans, she was eager to have a place of her own, somewhere she and James could truly be alone. Moving day was a community effort. The Zimmermans helped them carry furniture and supplies, and several neighbors showed up with housewarming gifts. Clara brought a set of dishes, Tom and Eliza brought a rocking chair, and Samuel brought a sturdy wooden table he had made himself. "Every home needs a good table," he said gruffly, "for family dinners and such." By evening, the cabin had been transformed. It was small but cozy, with a large stone fireplace dominating one wall and windows that looked out over the creek. Miriam stood in the main room, looking around with satisfaction. "It is perfect," she said. "You really think so?" James asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "I know it is not fancy." "I do not need fancy," Miriam said, leaning back against him. "I just need you. This is more of a home than anywhere I have ever lived." That night, they made love in their own bed for the first time, and somehow it felt even more special than before. This was their place, their sanctuary. Here they could build a life together, away from the past and all its pain. As winter slowly gave way to spring, Miriam flourished. She planted a garden behind the cabin, coaxing vegetables and herbs from the rich soil. She learned to ride a horse properly, and James would take her out in the evenings to explore the surrounding canyons. The red rock cliffs that she had first seen from a distance were even more spectacular up close, towering hundreds of feet above them in shades of crimson and orange. "It is like living in a painting," Miriam said one evening as they sat by the creek, watching the sunset paint the cliffs in shades of gold and pink. "I never get tired of it," James admitted, "even after all these years. There is something about this place that gets into your blood." In April, Miriam realized she had missed her monthly courses. At first, she thought it might just be the change in environment or stress. But when she missed a second month and began feeling queasy in the mornings, she knew. She was pregnant. She told James on a warm spring evening as they sat on the porch of their cabin. He had just come in from a long day of branding cattle, and she had made his favorite dinner. "I have something to tell you," she said after they finished eating. He looked at her with concern. "What is it? Is something wrong?" "No, nothing is wrong. In fact, everything is very right." She took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "I am going to have a baby, James. We are going to be parents." For a moment, he just stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then a huge grin spread across his face, and he let out a whoop of joy that probably scared every animal within a mile. "A baby," he breathed. "We are having a baby. Miriam, are you sure?" "I am sure," she said, laughing at his excitement. "The baby should come sometime in early December." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "I am going to be a father," he said wonderingly. "I cannot believe it. This is the best news I have ever heard." "You are happy then?" "Happy?" He pulled back to look at her, his eyes bright with tears. "Miriam, I am beyond happy. I do not even have words." You have given me everything. A home, a family, a reason to wake up in the morning. I love you so much." "I love you too," she whispered. They told the Zimmermans the next day, and Mrs. Zimmerman immediately went into planning mode. "We will need to set up a proper nursery," she said. "And you will need baby clothes, of course. I still have some things from when our boys were small. Oh, this is so exciting." As summer arrived, Miriam's belly began to swell with the growing life inside her. James became even more protective, barely letting her lift anything heavier than a dish towel. He would come home from work and find her doing some chore, and immediately insist she sit down and rest. "I am pregnant, not dying," she would protest, but secretly she loved his attention. The baby became the center of their world. They would lie in bed at night, James's hand on her belly, feeling the small kicks and movements. "What do you think it will be?" Miriam asked one night. "Boy or girl?" "I do not care," James said honestly. "As long as the baby is healthy and you are safe, that is all that matters to me." "If it is a boy, I want to name him after your father," Miriam said. "What was his name?" "William," James said softly. "William John Zimmerman." "Then, if it is a boy, we will call him William, and if it is a girl, maybe Margaret, after my mother." "Those are good names," James agreed. "Strong names." As autumn arrived and the days grew shorter, Miriam grew bigger and more uncomfortable. Her back ached constantly, and she had trouble sleeping. But she never complained. This baby was a gift, a symbol of the love she and James shared, and she would endure any discomfort to bring their child safely into the world. In early December, 2 days after the first snow, Miriam woke in the night with pain radiating through her back. At first she thought it was just another ache, but then she felt a warm rush of fluid between her legs. "James," she said urgently, shaking him awake. "James, the baby is coming." He was instantly alert, jumping out of bed and lighting a lamp. "Are you sure? It is not too early?" "I am sure," she said through gritted teeth as another contraction hit. "We need to get Mrs. Zimmerman." James rode through the dark to fetch Mrs. Zimmerman and the midwife, a capable woman named Ruth who lived in town. By the time they arrived, Miriam's contractions were coming regularly, each one more intense than the last. "You are doing fine," Ruth said, examining her. "First babies usually take their time, but you are progressing well. It should not be too much longer." James hovered nearby, looking pale and worried. "Can I do anything?" "Just stay close," Miriam gasped. "I need you here." The labor lasted through the night and into the next day. It was harder and more painful than Miriam had imagined, but every time she felt like she could not continue, she would look at James's face and find the strength to go on. He never left her side, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, encouraging her. Finally, as the sun was setting on the second day, Ruth said, "All right, Miriam, with the next contraction, I need you to push with everything you have got." Miriam bore down, pushing with all her might. She felt a tremendous pressure, then a sudden release, and then the most beautiful sound she had ever heard filled the cabin, a baby's cry. "It is a boy," Ruth announced, holding up the red-faced, squalling infant. "A healthy baby boy." James was crying openly, staring at his son with wonder. Ruth quickly cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a blanket, then placed him in Miriam's arms. "Hello, William," Miriam whispered, gazing down at the tiny face. He had stopped crying and was looking at her with dark, unfocused eyes. "Hello, my sweet boy." James sat beside her on the bed, one arm around her shoulders, the other hand gently touching the baby's soft hair. "He is perfect," he breathed. "Miriam, he is absolutely perfect." "He has your eyes," Miriam said. "Look, they are going to be brown like yours." "And he has your nose," James countered. "The Zimmerman nose, straight and proud." Mrs. Zimmerman appeared with tears streaming down her face. "Oh, he is beautiful, just beautiful. May I hold him?" Miriam reluctantly handed over her son, and Mrs. Zimmerman cooed over him, rocking him gently. "William John Zimmerman," she said, "welcome to the world, little one. You have no idea how loved you are." Over the next few weeks, Miriam and James adjusted to life with a newborn. William was a good baby, sleeping for long stretches and eating eagerly when he was awake. Miriam had never imagined she could love anything as much as she loved this tiny person who had come from her own body. James was a devoted father, often sitting up with William at night so Miriam could rest. He would hold his son against his chest, talking to him in a soft voice about the ranch, the cattle, the wide sky and red cliffs of their home. "I am going to teach you everything," he would say. "How to ride a horse, how to mend a fence, how to treat people with respect. And most importantly, I am going to teach you how to love your mother, because she is the most amazing woman in the world." Miriam would lie in bed, listening to James talk to their son, and feel her heart swell with love for both of them. This was her family. After years of loss and loneliness, she had found her place in the world. The years passed quickly after that, each one bringing new joys and challenges. William grew into a sturdy, happy child with his father's dark hair and his mother's quick smile. When he was 2, Miriam became pregnant again, and this time they had a daughter they named Margaret Sarah, after both their mothers. "We have a match set now," James joked as he held his tiny daughter for the first time. One of each. Margaret was different from William, more serious and observant. Where William had been loud and active, Margaret was quiet and thoughtful, but she was just as loved, just as precious. The cabin grew more crowded, and James began making plans to add on another room. With the help of neighbors and the Zimmermans, they expanded the cabin, creating a proper bedroom for the children and a larger living area. Life on the ranch was not easy. There were harsh winters and dry summers, years when the cattle prices dropped and money was tight. But they managed, always finding a way to make ends meet. James's hard work and reputation for honesty earned him more responsibility at the ranch, and eventually Mr. Zimmerman made him foreman, the same position his father had held. "You have earned it," Mr. Zimmerman said gruffly. "Best worker I have ever had, and that is the truth." Miriam kept the household running, raising their children, tending her garden, helping with the ranch work when she was needed. She learned to can vegetables, to make soap and candles, to sew clothes for her growing family. It was hard work, but it was satisfying in a way her old life had never been. The townspeople of Tropic became like an extended family. When William came down with scarlet fever at age 5, neighbors brought food and helped with chores, while Miriam and James took turns sitting up with him. When Margaret broke her arm falling from a tree, Ruth the midwife said it, and Clara brought over cookies to cheer her up. "This is what community is," Miriam told her children. "Taking care of each other, helping when times are hard, never forgetting that we are all in this together." When William was 7 and Margaret was 5, Miriam became pregnant for a 3rd time. This pregnancy was harder than the others, and she spent the last few months confined to bed rest. James hired a young woman from town to help with the household chores and the children, and he spent every free moment at Miriam's side. "I am scared," Miriam admitted one night. "I am older now, and this pregnancy feels different." "You are going to be fine," James said firmly, though she could see the worry in his eyes. "You are the strongest woman I know. You survived being thrown into a frozen ditch. You can survive anything." The labor was indeed difficult, lasting nearly 3 days. Ruth was worried enough to send for a doctor from Panguitch, but by the time he arrived, Miriam had delivered a 2nd son, smaller than William had been, but with healthy lungs and a strong grip. They named him Henry Samuel, after Mr. Zimmerman and old Samuel from the livery stable, both of whom had been like fathers to James. 3 children, James said, holding baby Henry, while William and Margaret peered at their new brother with curiosity. "We have been blessed, Miriam." "We have," she agreed, watching her family with tired but happy eyes. The children grew quickly, as children always do. William was fascinated by the ranch work and followed his father everywhere, learning everything he could about cattle and horses. Margaret loved reading and would spend hours with any book she could get her hands on, often reading stories aloud to young Henry. Henry, as he grew, proved to be a perfect combination of his siblings. He loved both the outdoor work and the books, and he had a quick wit that kept everyone laughing. On their 10th anniversary, James surprised Miriam with a beautiful bay mare. "I know you have been eyeing this one," he said, grinning at her shocked expression. "She is gentle but spirited, just like someone else I know." "James, she must have cost a fortune," Miriam protested, but she was already moving toward the horse, running her hand along its sleek neck. "You are worth it," James said simply. "Miriam, you have given me 10 years of happiness. You have given me 3 beautiful children and a home full of love. A horse seems like a small thing in comparison." She turned to him with tears in her eyes. "Do you ever regret it, taking a chance on a stranger you pulled out of a ditch?" "Never," he said firmly, pulling her into his arms. "Not for one single moment. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, Miriam Zimmerman." "You saved my life that night," she said softly. "But you kept saving it, every day since. You gave me a home, a family, a purpose. I love you so much, James." "I love you too," he murmured, kissing her deeply. "Mama and Papa are kissing again," Henry announced loudly from where he was playing with his siblings, making William and Margaret giggle. "You better get used to it," James called back, not letting go of Miriam. "I plan to keep kissing your mother for the next 50 years at least." The children groaned good-naturedly, but Miriam could see the happiness in their faces. They knew they were loved, knew their home was secure. That was all any child really needed. As the children grew into young adults, the cabin seemed both too small and too empty at the same time. William, at 18, had started courting Eliza's younger sister, a sweet girl named Julia. Margaret, at 16, had her heart set on becoming a teacher and was studying furiously for the entrance examination to the Teachers' College in Cedar City. Henry, at 12, was still young but showing signs of the fine man he would become. Mr. and Mrs. Zimmerman were getting older, and they began talking about retiring and moving to be near their other son, who had settled in Nevada. They offered to sell James the ranch at a price he could afford, and after much discussion, James and Miriam decided to take the opportunity. "Are you sure?" James asked Miriam. "It is a big responsibility. We would be taking on a lot of debt." "I am sure," Miriam said. "James, you have worked this land your whole life. You have earned the right to own it, and think of what it will mean for our children, for their children. We will be building something that will last." So, they bought the ranch, taking out a loan from the bank in Panguitch and promising to pay it back over 10 years. It was frightening to take on so much debt, but it was also exhilarating. They were landowners now, with a stake in the future. William married Julia in the spring, and they built a small house on the far side of the ranch property. When their first child was born, a daughter they named Miriam after her grandmother, Miriam Porter Zimmerman felt the circle of life complete itself in a beautiful way. "I held you when you were this small," she whispered to her granddaughter, "and now here I am, holding your daughter. Life is strange and wonderful, William." "It is," her son agreed. "Thank you, Mama, for everything, for being strong enough to take a chance on love. If you had not gotten on that stagecoach, if you had not fallen into that ditch, none of us would be here." "I suppose that is true," Miriam said thoughtfully. "Sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead us to the best. I was so scared that night, so certain I was going to die, and instead, I found your father, I found my whole life." Margaret eventually went off to Teachers' College, but she came home every summer and during holidays. She took a teaching position in Tropic when she graduated, saying she could not imagine living anywhere else. "This is home," she said simply. "Everything I love is here." Henry, as he grew older, showed an aptitude for business that surprised everyone. He started making suggestions about how to run the ranch more efficiently, which crops to plant in the fields, which markets to sell to. James listened carefully to his youngest son's ideas and often implemented them, pleased to see the boy thinking about the future of their land. On their 25th anniversary, James and Miriam stood on the porch of their cabin, watching the sun set over the red cliffs. William and Julia's children were playing in the yard, their laughter carrying on the warm evening air. Margaret was inside making dinner, and Henry was down at the barn tending to the horses. 25 years, Miriam said wonderingly. "Has it really been that long?" "Best 25 years of my life," James said, pulling her close. His hair was graying now, and there were lines around his eyes, but to Miriam he was still the handsome cowboy who had pulled her from a frozen ditch and changed her entire world. "Do you remember that first night?" she asked, "when you held me to keep me warm?" "I remember everything," James said. "I remember how cold you were, how scared. I remember thinking that I could not let you die, that the world needed you in it. I just did not know yet that I needed you." "I was so lost," Miriam reflected. "My father was dead. I had no money, no prospects, no idea what I was going to do with my life. And then the stagecoach crashed, and I thought that was it. That was the end. But it was really the beginning. The beginning of us," James agreed. He turned her to face him, his hands on her shoulders. "Miriam, I want you to know something. These 25 years with you have been better than anything I could have imagined. You made me believe in love, in family, in building something that lasts. You are my partner, my best friend, the love of my life, and I would do it all over again in a heartbeat." "So would I," Miriam said, tears streaming down her face. "Every hard winter, every sleepless night with sick children, every worry about money or drought or cattle prices. I would do it all again, because it means I get to be with you." They kissed then, a long, sweet kiss that still held all the passion of their youth, but was deepened by years of shared experience, of joy and sorrow weathered together. "Grandma and Grandpa are kissing again," a young voice announced, making them both laugh. "Come here, you rascals," James called, and soon they were surrounded by grandchildren, all wanting hugs and attention. This was their legacy, Miriam thought, as she looked around at her family. Not money or land or possessions, though they had worked hard for those things, but love, connection, roots that went deep into the Utah soil. They had built something real and lasting, something that would continue long after they were gone. As the years continued to pass, James and Miriam gradually handed over more of the ranch responsibilities to their children. William proved to be as capable a foreman as his father had been. Margaret married a man from a neighboring ranch, a kind fellow named Robert, and they had 2 children of their own. Henry eventually went into partnership with his brother, handling the business side of the ranch while William managed the daily operations. Miriam and James became the beloved grandparents, always ready with a story or a cookie, always available for comfort when the children scraped knees or bruised feelings. They took long rides on the beautiful horses they kept, exploring the canyons they had first discovered together so many years before. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if things had been different?" Miriam asked one day as they sat by the creek, the same creek where their cabin had been built. "If I had made it to Kanab, to my aunt's boarding house?" "Sometimes," James admitted, "but I cannot imagine it. You are so much a part of me, of this place, that it feels like you were always meant to be here." "Maybe I was," Miriam said softly. "Maybe everything happened exactly the way it was supposed to. My father dying, me being forced to leave Salt Lake City, the stagecoach crashing. Maybe it was all leading me to you." "I like that thought," James said, taking her hand in his. Even now, after 35 years of marriage, he still reached for her hand whenever she was near. That we were meant to find each other. They celebrated their 40th anniversary with a huge gathering at the ranch. It seemed like everyone in Tropic and the surrounding areas came to celebrate with them. There was music and dancing and food enough to feed an army. Their children and grandchildren performed a skit telling the story of how Miriam and James met, complete with a dramatic reenactment of the stagecoach crash that had everyone laughing. "To Grandma and Grandpa," William said, raising his glass, "who proved that true love really does exist, that sometimes falling into a frozen ditch is actually the luckiest thing that can happen to you." Everyone laughed and drank to the toast, and Miriam felt so full of happiness she thought her heart might burst. As they grew older, James's joints began to ache from a lifetime of hard work, and Miriam's eyesight started to fail. But they faced these challenges together, just as they had faced everything else. James got spectacles for Miriam so she could continue reading, her great passion. Miriam learned to make herbal remedies that eased James's aching joints. "We are getting old," James said one evening as they sat on their porch, watching yet another sunset. "We are," Miriam agreed. "But we are getting old together. That is all that matters." When they were in their early 60s, Mrs. Zimmerman, who had moved back to Tropic to be near them after her husband passed, died peacefully in her sleep. Miriam and James mourned her deeply, remembering how she had welcomed Miriam with open arms, how she had helped her become a part of the community. "She was like a mother to both of us," James said at the funeral. "She taught us about kindness, about generosity, about what it means to be family. We will miss her every day." But life continued, as it always does. New babies were born, grandchildren grew up, and started families of their own. And the ranch continued to thrive under the capable management of the next generation. On a warm spring day when James was 67 and Miriam was 65, they took one last ride together up into the canyons. James's health had been declining, his heart giving him trouble, and they both knew their time together was growing shorter. "Do you remember the first time we rode up here?" Miriam asked as they stopped to rest the horses. "I remember thinking that I wanted to show you everything," James said. "Every beautiful place, every secret canyon. I wanted you to love this land the way I did." "And I do," Miriam said. "James, I have never regretted a single moment of our life together. Not one. You gave me everything I ever dreamed of, and so much more. You gave me a reason to dream, James replied. "Before you, I was just going through the motions. But you made me want more, want better. You made me want to build something that would last, and we did. Look at what we have created, Miriam. Look at our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren. That is our legacy." "It is a good legacy," Miriam agreed, tears streaming down her face because she knew what he was really saying, that he was saying goodbye. "I love you," James said, reaching over to take her hand. "I will always love you, even beyond death. You are my heart, Miriam. You always have been." "And you are mine," she whispered. They sat there for a long time, holding hands, watching the sun paint the cliffs in shades of gold and crimson, neither wanting to break the spell of this perfect moment. James passed away peacefully 3 months later, sitting in his favorite chair on the porch with Miriam beside him. His last words were her name, spoken with all the love and devotion of 45 years together. Miriam mourned him deeply, but she did not let grief consume her. She had their children and grandchildren to think about, a legacy to protect. She continued to live at the ranch, now surrounded by family, always ready with wisdom and stories about the man they had all loved. When her great-granddaughter, little Miriam Porter Zimmerman III, asked her about her life one day, Miriam smiled and began the story. "Well, sweetheart, it all started on a cold January night in 1881. I was on a stagecoach heading to Kanab when I was thrown from the stage into a frozen ditch. I thought I was going to die, but then a cowboy pulled me out and kept me warm. His name was James, and he became the love of my life." "That is so romantic, great-grandma," the little girl sighed. "It was," Miriam agreed. But the real romance was not the one dramatic night. It was every day after. It was 45 years of waking up next to him, of working together, of raising children and building a life. That is what real love is, sweetheart. Not the grand gestures, but the small daily choices to keep loving someone even when it is hard. "Did you ever wish you had gone to Kanab instead? To your aunt's boarding house?" "Never," Miriam said firmly. "Not once. Because if I had gone to Kanab, I would have missed everything that mattered. I would have missed James, missed this ranch, missed all of you. Falling into that frozen ditch was the luckiest thing that ever happened to me." Miriam lived to be 83 years old, surrounded by multiple generations of the family she and James had created. When she passed away peacefully in her sleep one spring morning, she was laid to rest next to James in the small cemetery in Tropic, under a simple headstone that read, "Miriam Porter Zimmerman, beloved wife, mother, grandmother, 1856-1939. She was thrown from a stage into a frozen ditch. A cowboy pulled her out and kept her warm, and they lived happily ever after." The ranch continued to thrive for generations after, always remaining in the Zimmerman family. And every child born into that family grew up hearing the story of their great-great-grandparents, of how a terrible accident on a frozen night had led to the greatest love story any of them had ever known. They learned that sometimes life throws you into a ditch, but if you are very lucky, someone will be there to pull you out and keep you warm, not just for one night, but for the rest of your life.